Welcome to Navigating the Customer Experience. Want to improve your organization's customer service? Looking for insider tips to knock your customer socks off? Then you're in the right place. Here's your host, Yannick Grant.
Welcome to Navigating the Customer Experience. On today's episode, a very special day, International Women's Day. So a shout out to all those women out there throughout the globe who are doing amazing things in their industries. We have a very special guest with us today, and her name is Jennifer Brown. Jennifer is an award-winning entrepreneur, dynamic speaker, and diversity and inclusion expert. She is the founder, president, and CEO of Jennifer Brown Consulting, a strategic leadership and diversity consulting firm that coaches business leaders worldwide on critical issues of talent and workplace strategy. Brown is a passionate advocate for social equality who helps businesses foster healthier, more productive workplace cultures. Her book, Inclusion, Diversity, the New Workplace, and the Will to Change, will inspire leadership to embrace the opportunity that diversity represents and empower advocates to drive change that resonates in today's world. So without further delay, welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you, Yannick. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So before we start off getting into the meat of the questions, we always like to give our guests an opportunity to give us a little background. How did you end up in this area, this arena of diversity and inclusion? What was your journey like? If you could just share, just a little background on that.
Surely. There is, as we like to say in this field, not a lot of standard paths towards a career in diversity and inclusion. In fact, if you try to find academic programs that address or degrees that address this topic, you probably will come up empty-handed. So
Sure.
We all come from different places. For me, I was an activist in nonprofits in my 20s, but I was also always a musician. And it was sort of an amateur pursuit in those early days in my life, but it was a huge passion. So I decided to make it my profession and give it a shot. I moved to New York to become an opera singer and study at a conservatory and get my master's in voice, which was really exciting and heady times for me. But unfortunately, through the course of training, I injured my voice and ended up having to get several surgeries on my voice to repair it. But it was ultimately, I realized it wasn't going to work. My voice just would not be an instrument that I could count on for a career where I could make my living. So, so it was heartbreaking, but it led me towards where a lot of theater people go because we love the stage and we're so good in front of people. A lot of us become trainers and educators. And, in fact, we find a home in leadership, in the whole kind of field of leadership, whether that's as a consultant or a learning and development person. So I ended up getting a second master's in organizational development, organizational change. It goes by a lot of different names, but it's basically the HR education realm. And I was a corporate learning and development, training and development leader for a while as an employee. And then I got laid off and I said, I think I can have more impact from the outside if I became kind of that third party, that expert. And that really appealed to me. It still appeals to me to this day. It's the best role for me to play, which is that, agitator, but not the employee, which helps. Gives me some authority, gives me some distance, gives me some, credibility, earned or unearned or deserved, but it is what it is. People tend to want to listen to people who've written books on things and people who are external when they don't do a very good job of listening to their employees, which is another, maybe we'll talk about that. So I ended up hanging my shingle out about 12 years ago and doing leadership and team development and morphing into D&I because I think I felt pulled in that direction to specialize because I'm a member of the LGBTQ community and I've been out since I was 22. And yet I had really struggled with being out throughout my life, whether that was, even in the nonprofit world, certainly in the opera and music world. And then as an entrepreneur, where I felt very exposed to bias if I were to be honest and authentic about who I actually am. And that's, it's a huge part of our lives to deny and to walk around and do business without talking about it, without kind of leaving that hole and not feeling it's going to be accepted. And it's also going to hurt your ability to make a living, which is really problematic. So, so now we do specialize in diversity and inclusion. And I'm I'm fully out all the time. Gosh, you could Google me and, it's very plain. It is actually, I consider, part of my secret sauce. It's part of where I've cut my teeth on my own, developing my own voice, my bravery, my courage, my resilience. A lot of that has come from that identity and the pain of some of the painful lessons of exclusion that has allowed me and enabled me to feel, to think about, to empathize with. And it's really, I think, hopefully made me a more inclusive leader, not just because I'm LGBTQ, but for all communities that need my voice as an ally. So it's a very cool place to find myself now, where I get to write books and speak about all this stuff. And it's particularly timely because the topic is, I would say, there's never been more attention on the topic than there is now.
That is true. That is true. As a matter of fact, the theme for International Women's Day is balanced for better. And so as it relates to diversity and inclusion, could you share with us some of the issues that have been maybe barriers to preventing a fully diversified and inclusive workplace based on your experience?
Yeah, it has a lot of reasons and a lot of factors. It's rather complex, and yet it's kind of simple at the same time. Because the mandate is simple, right? The need to reflect your customer base, which is diversifying quickly, who has the spending power, for example, that, non-white communities are the fastest growing consumer communities, right? With the largest spending power. I think the gay community now has $1 trillion of spending power. So, consumers are getting smarter. They're getting organized. They're finding their voice. They're using it to hold brands accountable, which is exciting, and make spending choices that reflect their values. And yet companies, in terms of their employee mix, particularly in the top half or third of organizations, really don't reflect that diverse world. And, company structures are old school. I don't know any better way to say it. They have been unchallenged, and they haven't challenged themselves in terms of the makeup of their senior leadership in particular. And they haven't really, many companies, not all, but many companies have kind of gone about their merry way trying to make money and really not focused on anything larger than that, whether it's how employees feel, who's succeeding and feels they can thrive in the organization, who may be reaching senior leadership roles and who's not, and why they're feeling thwarted in that process up the pipeline. And so I think there's this business as usual, we're here to make money, we're here to generate shareholder results. And there's not been a lot of attention paid to values, the importance of the workforce and what they want and need in order to stay and thrive. And there's honestly a lot of bias around, I worked hard and all you need to do is work hard too, and you'll achieve what I've achieved. So this belief in meritocracy. And it's really easy to believe in meritocracy when people that look like you have benefited from that. It hasn't been a challenge. There haven't been stereotypes that have affected you. You have been pulled forward by others that look like you without even knowing it sometimes.
Yeah.
And so there's this willful blindness, I think, to the difficulties that are faced by anyone that is not of a certain demographic in workforces. It's sort of, I write it off. I don't take it seriously. I don't listen to it. I don't even know it, honestly. So there's a lot of education that's needed around micro inequities, unconscious bias, HR processes that are so critical, like recruitment, retention, promotion, and advancement, all those moments in the employee life cycle where bias occurs. It's in a large part, I think, still allowed to kind of continue. And so what our job is to interrupt those things and come in as a company and build strategies that help companies wake up, get educated, care about it, honestly, have empathy for other people, which I know you shouldn't even need to say, but it feels at its heart, it feels that, if I explain something to you and you don't care and then you don't take action, that hurts. That's really, because there's a ton of research on this. It's not even like this is a mystery.
True.
It's right there. And so the best leaders and the best companies are really forward. They're asking all these great questions. They're humbling themselves to their own learning, to their own mistakes. They're publishing their data and saying, "Hey, here's our data, and I know it sucks, and we're working to change it." That's what courage looks like. That's what leadership looks like these days. And I wish I saw more of it.
Yeah, that's so true. I like the fact that you mentioned that it's not something that people are accustomed to. And Change is hard. Unfortunately, human beings don't adapt to change very readily. And I don't think it's based on the geography in terms of where you're from in the world. I think it's just general human nature. So it would mean that you have to put yourself in a place of being uncomfortable in order to move from one stage to the next.
That's right. And nobody wants to be uncomfortable, do we?
That is true.
It's like, but you know, the flip side is it makes you so much better of a leader and a better team member and better colleague. And by the way, better parent, better community leader. You know, all of these, there's a reason that you open a paper today and diversity is in every headline. You know, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
Because institutions are really struggling with it of all kinds, for-profit, nonprofit, community organizations, church leadership. So there is probably no area of your life where you can afford to not understand and embrace this conversation and do your work. You know, your kid could come home tomorrow and say, "Mom, I think I'm transgender." And you would be completely ill-equipped to deal with that. I mean, and most parents, to be fair, most parents are. You know, it's something that is, life does not prepare you for that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, don't you want to be ready?
True.
Right? And I think if you even if you're interviewing for jobs, you know, even if you're leading teams at a company that values diversity and you don't, or you haven't paid attention to it, you haven't, you've assumed it's somebody else's job to care about it. None of that is going to work for you in the long run. So that's usually, I mean, it's a little bit of a scare tactic, but I have to use every tool I have to convince people that this is important, which is really tiring and honestly kind of depressing sometimes.
Because you're wondering how they don't get it, right?
Right. Please have empathy for people that, you know, haven't had as easy of a road as you. You know, it's just that. And then I don't know why we have to ask and convince and scare and, you know, it's
we do so
how many
much.
different techniques do we need to basically talk about something that's such a human right and is all about the dignity of, you know, everyone in this world to do their best work and to feel, you know, their sense of purpose every day.
True. And to feel appreciated. I mean, a lot of people work in organizations and they just don't feel appreciated. And I think they've lost the purpose. If there was even a purpose from day one, they've definitely lost it. You know, I mean, it comes out in the interactions that they have with customers. It comes out in how they relate to their team members, sometimes unconscious of the fact that the customer is observing you in every interaction that they, you know, once they're standing in front of you, or, you know, or you're on the phone and you ask them to hold, but you didn't actually put the phone on hold. So they're hearing everything that's happening in the background.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yes, it truly is. So as it relates to diversity and inclusion, Jennifer, could you share with us maybe one or two strategies that you think, simple strategies that, I mean, for those of our listeners that are small and medium-sized business owners, they may not have the, you know, the massive capital to like a complete overhaul of their organization, but they want to embrace having a diversified culture and one where people feel included, they feel happy, you know, there's a culture of growth and encouragement and appreciation. If you could share with us maybe two strategies that you think that they could employ, you know, once they finish listening to this episode.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, small companies have a great opportunity. It's actually much easier to shift things than for large organizations, I think. And certainly remembering that if you build it right from the beginning, you will have a much easier time down the road. So it's very important to think about how you are recruiting and retaining all kinds of talent, how comfortable they feel once they are in your organization, and really being open to feedback about when that inclusiveness, the desire for inclusiveness is actually, though, being interpreted, and the impact of an intention is one of exclusion. I think sometimes we don't want to know the answer to that question, so we don't ask. And so it's very critical, particularly if you're not a person of a marginalized or underrepresented background yourself. You're going to have some blind spots, I think. Your network is going to look a lot like you. So you will tend to recruit from that network, right? You will have blind spots around how people perceive your brand and even blind spots probably about your desired customers. So that to the extent that you can ensure your team that you build reflects the world that you're doing business in, it will allow you to resonate and to see around that corner and to anticipate that audience and that customer and gear your communications accordingly. and have a check and balance on how are we coming across in the marketplace. And like you said, we're being observed all the time. So your future talent is looking at your current organization and looking at your website and thinking about, would I be comfortable there? Well, I don't see anyone that looks like me there. And that's something that's hard to fix in some cases, because when you're an entrepreneur, you're grabbing warm bodies, right? You're trying to get work done. It's very fast. You are going to pull from your own network because it's most expedient, and that network is going to tend to look like you. And so you've got to actively counterbalance that in your outreach, in the talent pools that you're seeking, in the way you talk proactively and very overtly about your commitment to inclusion. I would really recommend you have that in all of your marketing materials. I don't care what business you're in. There's always a way to talk about what inclusion means as a value to you and to what you're trying to build and to the customers you're trying to serve. There are ways to do that. And I would recommend you do it because it's sort of a beacon, not only for talent you hope to recruit and to say, hey, this is a safe place for you. This is a place that you are wanted and needed, not just tolerated or accepted. And we need all of you to bring your full self to work. This is a place in which you can do that. And then, we want to best serve the customer and their needs and wants. And, companies are at real risk of missing some there's just a lot of mistakes that are made because diverse talent is not at the table when creative decisions are made or marketing collateral is designed. We've seen very high-level mistakes made by brands like PepsiCo with the ad that they had where there was like a mock Black Lives Matter march, and one of the Kardashians was handing a Pepsi, I think, across the police line.
Yes.
It was a nightmare.
Oh my goodness.
And they pulled it immediately. And it became kind of a case study that a lot of us talk about, where we wonder who was at the table making those decisions. And if they were at the table, were they listened to? Were they really considered? Was that feedback taken into account? So I don't know where the error happened in their process, because I don't have the inside look into them. But at a smaller scale, this stuff can happen all the time. And I think you've got to make sure you're mentored and coached, and you run things by people. You think about the nuances of the diversity conversation, because it is really nuanced. Language is changing all the time. And I get a lot of complaints about our trans and gender nonconforming friends will say, yeah, I identify as they, them. So that's my preferred pronoun. And people will literally say, well, I don't feel comfortable referring to you as that. It's grammatically incorrect and I feel uncomfortable. And it's just amazing to me, back to our point earlier, do you want to, is a small action on your part that allows somebody to feel seen and heard, is that so much work?
Yeah.
I think it's such a red herring. It's just an excuse to not grow. And I don't understand it. I think if you're in business, you should want more language. You should want more ways to talk to people and resonate with them. That's what you should want.
Very true. Now, in terms of how this impacts the customer experience, could you share with us some of the best practices that you've seen in organizations and how it has translated into retention and, better customer experiences overall?
Yes. So I think that companies that, are designing products, for example, for different communities, some of the larger organizations I work with literally have something called employee resource groups, or they're called business resource groups, but they are diversity networks. Maybe they're a multicultural talent network. Maybe they're a Black employee network. Maybe they're an LGBTQ network. And most companies are trying to reach those diverse demographics so they can sell more to them. But they realize that they don't have the intelligence on the inside to really do this well and effectively. The smart ones realize that. So they end up, they have these groups or these networks for a lot of reasons. These networks serve a lot of purposes in organizations. And these can exist in small companies too, by the way. I've worked with 200-person companies that have a full diversity committee. They have several employee resource groups that are literally playing kind of this market intelligence role for the company. So you don't have to be big to access this idea. And they are at the table informing product design, informing marketing strategies, informing sales, educating the sales team and anyone that's external facing around cultural nuances and behaviors and language. I know in banks and financial services, a lot of the financial advisors tend to be white, tend to be male, and yet the biggest growth in wealth is in diverse wealth holders, female heads of household, people of color. And yet you have a financial advisor community in all the big banks and insurance companies that doesn't really look like that. And they're struggling to diversify those ranks on the inside. So literally there are certifications you can get. For example, as a financial advisor, you can get certified in selling to the LGBTQ community, selling financial products to that community. And you go somewhere and you get a designation that you can put after your name. And yes, you're an ally, you're a straight ally, you're not in that community, but and you're investing in how to be culturally competent when you are selling to that community. So I guess, your listenership probably is selling a lot of different kinds of things. We're all in sales all the time. We all have customers. And, it's all about resonating with them and making sure you're staying up to speed on what their care-abouts are and how they talk about themselves and how they kind of getting inside their lives and anticipating what they want and need. So I do think it's just that awareness. And there's just a lot of examples of brands that have done this really well. Heineken had a great ad that aired, I think, a Super Bowl ago that I would encourage everybody to go look at, where they introduce people to each other without providing a lot of demographic information about the person. And they give them some questions to talk about. And, they pair somebody who might have very conservative views with somebody who's in the military and who identifies as transgender, but they don't tell them any of these things. And then they encourage some conversation. And then they kind of reveal later on, well, actually, this person that you've bonded with, this is who they actually are and how they identify. And are you surprised? And do you feel your bias is being challenged? It's really, really neat. And I think there's a lot of interesting ads. Gillette just came out with an incredible ad. I would encourage everyone to go and watch it on masculinity.
Oh, I loved it.
And it was so good.
It was so good.
It was so good. And there was a lot of threatened boycotts. There was
a
lot of anger. Yeah. Crazy. And yet I watched it with my partner and we literally cried. I mean, it was so moving, and to think that something that could move us and touch your soul could make so many people angry is really indicative of the polarized times we live in. But by the way, Gillette's sales went up after that ad, by a considerable amount. So threatened boycott or not, anger or not in social media, I think they correctly diagnosed the bump that they would get through putting their values out there and saying, here's what we want to be about. And we know that as a brand, we haven't always been all that hip to the issues. And so we're trying to be. And I think it really worked. I mean, it definitely burnished the brand for me and countless other potential customers.
Amazing. So this is definitely something that's new. And of course, it's definitely going to continue into another couple of years. As you said, people are trying to flesh out what does that mean for them based on their organization, based on where they operate in the world, based on who they're trying to target. And as you said, how much sales they're trying to increase in what community, and if they can connect with these people, because as you stated at the beginning of our conversation, people are now buying from brands that represent the values that they hold near and dear to them. And sometimes that's very hard to find. And it's amazing that, consumers are taking this stance, because it just goes to show that the power is really in the hands of the consumer. And it's going to be, continuing even more. I mean, social media has given them so much power in terms of the things that they do, the comments and the feedback that they give. And so it's not so much about what the brand says about themselves, but what the consumer has to say based on their experiences with the product or the service.
That's right. And it goes beyond the four walls of the company. I mean, there is no such thing anymore. There's total transparency. As you said, there's a lot of accountability and a lot of communities, right? Diverse communities who are questioning, do we want to work at a place like that? Do we want to patronize a place like that? Do we, what do they stand for? People really now want to hear, what do you mean? And are you walking the talk? And I'm really excited to see this accountability and the visibility that we have. We can peer into how companies do business, and employees are finding their voice and really being public about it. Like the Google walkout of a couple of months ago had 20,000 employees all over the world walking out and protesting their whole process that they handle sexual harassment claims and pay equity. They had this whole list of demands, and it was really inspiring to see. And Google had to pay attention; they just had to, and they've been kind of on a journey of addressing some, not all, of the requests / demands that the employees had. But, so I think we're going to see this is not going away, this accountability. And it's exciting, I think, because brands have gotten away with a lot in the past. I think they've gotten away with unfair workplace practices. They've protected their data. They haven't been forced to admit where, their board is entirely white and male, but it's never been talked about in the news before. I mean, those days are over. And if you're in a company where you haven't been called out publicly, it will happen. And so a lot of our work is actually these days about helping brands and companies make sure they're doing their work internally. And so hopefully that day never comes. Hopefully they never make a misstep. But that accountability is fierce and swift. And, I almost, feel like we need to start teaching the art of the apology to our customers because they're going to make mistakes. They are absolutely going to. And so the question is, how do you come back from a mistake? How do you apologize, own what happened, say you're learning, talk about what you're going to be recommitting to, what you're going to do differently in the future. I mean, even that as something you're prepared for, that's a new idea. But I think it would behoove all business owners and even all managers to think about, when I say the wrong word, do people trust me enough and they know that they can come to me and tell me?
Yeah.
That's what you really, really want. You want to ask for that. You want to earn people's trust because, by the way, you can't just one day and once only say, hey, can you let me know if I ever, make you feel uncomfortable? It's not a one and done.
Yeah, that's true.
And, so I think you've got to earn that trust that somebody then will trust you enough to be honest with you and say, hey, that joke you say or that saying you say, or, do you know that you stole that person's idea in the room or assigned it to you took it and you attributed it to somebody else, or did you realize that men did 90% of the talking in that meeting?
True.
We've got to be sensitive to these things, and we just haven't been in the past. So I think, and we need help to learn. And so it's not just something you do need to do a lot on your own. You need to educate yourself. You need to read a lot of books about bias and team dynamics and being an inclusive leader. My book is helpful, I've been told by a lot of people. I hope it's helpful.
It is.
Yeah. So read these books, but commit to making behavior change in yourself and inviting feedback, and then act on that feedback, adjust, be humble, be resilient, have that growth mindset, which is failing forward. You're going to fail. It happens to all of us. We're all biased.
True.
And it's hard to keep up with this, but you have to try. I think that's huge points for trying.
I like the fact that you made point to the fact that the change starts with you, because I find in a lot of organizations, the managers or the leaders are quick to say, well, they need to do so and so, and they're not including themselves in the process because it all starts with them as well. And as the leader or the manager, if I'm in the organization, I'm looking to see what you are doing, because I'm taking lead from the behaviors that you've demonstrated, the attitudes that you've demonstrated. And yes, I may have my own values, but in an organization, people kind of watch what's happening and they kind of conform to the culture that exists. And if they do anything out of the norm, it means that they're going to stand out. And because most people don't want to stand out, they're kind of just going to go along with whatever is happening there, whether it's good or bad sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, the best example of what you're talking about, I think, is watching how many men take paternity leave or parental leave. We don't get a lot in this country. Some companies are really, really trying to become much more generous around leave, and actually going as far as requiring some employees to take leave because there's such a stigma around taking leave. And particularly for men and male parents in any family configuration, it is particularly shamed, I think, to take even the leave that's provided, take all of that leave. It's not viewed as a positive. You get pressure. It's spoken and unspoken pressure.
Yes.
Right? And men follow other men and follow what they do. And they decide what the norms are based on what they see, particularly senior people doing. So you're right that we take our cues from everyone we watch above us in a way. And we say, well, that's acceptable. That's not acceptable. That's a boundary I can cross, or that's a boundary that I shouldn't cross. And this is why, particularly with leave and also vacation, interestingly, there's some companies that are starting to require vacation because we don't take all the vacation we have. And that's not because we don't want to take a vacation. It's because we don't think it's going to be okay to do so.
Yeah.
So the norms that are communicated through behavior of others, particularly senior people, we are watching, and we are then deciding, what should I do that's not going to hurt my career in this particular culture?
Exactly.
So I would encourage people to think about, it almost needs to be mandated, because people, until such time as we can change this dynamic of pressure and peer pressure and watching these role modeling behavior happen, and kind of employees not taking care of themselves and not really doing what they need to do to have a balanced life, we may need to mandate some things. And one I just interviewed this woman, Erica Keswin, and I really recommend her book called Bring Your Human to Work. And she has so many examples of what companies are doing in this vein to encourage leave, to encourage parenting, and to encourage balance and flex, and literally power to the employee to really have that balance. That is the theme of, I love that. The theme of Women's Month is how do we achieve this? But remember, men need balance too. Single parents need balance. People without children need balance who are caregiving. We may be doing none of those things, but we may need just balance for our time off. And so let's not be biased in terms of how we set systems up as well, and assume, that only one group of people needs to manage their work-life balance, which traditionally was spoken of as a sort of women's challenge, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really changing. I hope it's changing. I hope men are thinking about what they need, and they're advocating for themselves. Younger men, I have a lot of hopes for millennial generation to say, this is what I need and want, whether that's a sabbatical, whether it's flexible work assignments and arrangements, whether it's different career opportunities and moving around a lot more often. And I just hope that employees are in the driver's seat. I think it's time to assume our more powerful position, I think, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Jennifer, could you share with us how you stay motivated every day? How do you basically stay on track with everything that you're doing, maintain that drive, that passion? What are some of the things that keeps you motivated every day?
Yeah, I call it self-care. And when you do diversity work, it has to be radical self-care, because like we were talking about earlier, it can get kind of depressing to have these conversations over and over about why empathy matters. We have not succeeded in building healthy workplace cultures, and that is wearing us down. It's tiring us. It's actually making us physically ill from stress-related issues. When you can't be yourself, it's very harmful.
For sure.
So talking about this all the time is equally inspiring and also kind of depressing, and makes me angry and frustrated. And I have days when I want to give up. But that's also entrepreneurship, right? It's
true.
It's you have this passion. You're trying to raise money. You're trying to hire your team. You're trying to get contracts signed. So I think we need to. How I fill my cup is gathering with people that care about what I care about, and just being able to let my guard down and be real about the frustrations and how it feels every day. And for me, that might be in a room of women entrepreneurs, as it fills me up to think about how are you growing your business, and where, just to see myself in them is a way of finding that space where you can say, I'm not alone. I think isolation is really dangerous for us. So who are your communities? Where can you be real and let your hair down and let your guard down? Be honest. Where can you go to feel re-inspired, to realize the size of the community that's trying to do similar things or that shares your values? There's a lot of conferences on conscious capitalism. And so it's not just diversity conferences. It's conferences about values at work, and culture conference, which is about why workplace cultures matter. There's a lot of great HR conferences that are talking more and more about what I do. So it's this incredible convergence that I'm seeing in my conversation to many other sort of parallel worlds, which is a really cool thing to see. So I would just recommend, find your community, gather with them, put yourself around people that are having the highs and lows and everything in between. find folks you can be really real and honest with where it's very offline, so nobody's watching, and people who will hold your confidence. But ultimately, I think to me that has really sustained me. I have an amazing team as well. I don't try to do this alone, and I never really have. I've always wanted to build this beyond myself. Because I knew I wouldn't be able to touch all the lives that I wanted to without a team of people that could be going out and being in those classrooms and building those strategies for the companies and bringing those practices back to our group so that we could do more of it. So I have an incredible consulting team that does client work. I have a great marketing team that feels like we are all very aligned in terms of how much we believe in what we're doing every day. And we're all sharing articles all the time. We're sending inspirational stuff to each other. We're sending discouraging new data to each other, which just fuels the fight. So I'd say if you're the kind of person that, for whom maybe a team would feel that it would help you do the work and get up every day for a reason, then you might want to build a different kind of organization.
Yeah.
There's a lot of us that just want to do it alone, and that takes a certain kind of personality. It was never really me. So I think it's important to know what kind of leader are you? What do you need around you? Who do you need around you to be able to do your work and really find your sweet spot and your voice in that work? And then who needs to surround you to enable that so that you can focus on what you do best?
Mm-hmm. Very good. All right. Could you share with us what's the one online resource, tool, website, or app that you couldn't absolutely live without in your business?
Oh, it's such a hard choice. There are so many. I have my favorite podcasts. I have my favorite research institutions. One tool? Are you limiting me to just one?
You can share two.
I could share a couple.
Yeah.
Okay. So I really rely on research by McKinsey and Deloitte are probably my favorite my go-to resources for data on the way the workforce is changing. So, there are these amazing think tanks they're very well resourced, they're very cutting edge, and a lot of that information fuels our consulting work, right? We just take that to clients and they hadn't seen it. It's compelling data about the future, and, we can help kind of flesh it out because of our expertise. So it really, really works well. And then on the personal side, I really love this woman who runs a daily Facebook Live called Resistance Live. And that's more sort of for my personal fuel. It talks about what's happening in our political system, the new generation of Democratic leaders and candidates, and the whole developing conversation around progressive values is exciting to me, and again, kind of feeds the certainty that I am going in the right direction and that there is a big community that is asking the same questions that I'm asking. So, look up Resistance Live. But there's so many women's podcasts that I listen to, so many where I also get my education around difference. I listen to Code Switch, which is an NPR podcast about race and ethnicity and code switching, which is a critical, I think, foundational principle in terms of when we talk about diversity. And all of us are code switching all the time around a variety of aspects.
Yeah.
So that's one of my go-to podcasts to learn about how other people experience code switching and how I can be an ally to lessen some of what people feel that need to code switch every single day, how I can lessen that need and support people to bring their full selves to wherever and not have to put all of that energy into hiding and minimizing and shifting and speaking a different language to different people. It's exhausting stuff and we shouldn't have to do it.
Amazing. All right. So we're going to have all of those resources that Jennifer has shared with us, the McKinsey and Deloitte links, if any of you are looking for good research, and also the podcast that she shared with us. We'll also have a link to that if you're interested in learning about code switching as well. Now, Jennifer, could you share with us some of the books that have had the biggest impact on you? I know that you've shared the one about Human by Erica Keswin, and of course your own book that we're going to have in the show notes of this episode as well. I hope that many of our listeners will be able to grab a copy on Amazon. It's an amazing book. And if you're just embarking on diversity and inclusion, or you're already on that journey, it's definitely a tool that you can utilize. But outside of those two, could you share with us any that maybe have helped you on your journey or are helping you in your journey?
Yes, I love that question. Thank you for asking. I have so many favorite authors. It's difficult to narrow it down, as usual. But I would say, so there's a new book called Better Allies by my friend Karen Caitlin, Caitlin. And literally she runs around, she's a woman in tech. She was a VP in a technology company in a technical role. And today she's an author and keynoter, and she has a million ideas for how to be a better ally. She's got a hashtag and a handle on Twitter called Better Allies, which I really recommend everybody follow. But she has a new book that literally pulls all that together in one place, which is so helpful. So that's one book that I would encourage reading. I don't think there's a lot written on allyship. So this is an emerging area. My new book coming out in August does talk about this a lot as well, and sort of the allied journey, how you can get on board, how you can put one foot in front of the other, and whether it's adopting one new word and trying to understand what it means and using it, all the way to kind of advanced allyship, which is I'm an advocate in my organization. I'm like a big time voice. I'm challenging the system and everything in between. So Better Allies is great. David Smith wrote a book called Athena Rising about why men should mentor women. And I really pay a lot of attention to men, and they're not many men who are writing about inclusion and men who speak on it, because it's so important in so many ways. That they're involved, but B, other men are going to listen to them and read them in a different way. And I think maybe many people are used to people who look like me and you speaking about all these things, but for a man to speak about it is powerful. So Those are two amazing books I would point people towards. That are great reads and full of practical advice.
Excellent. All right. So we'll also have the links to those books in the show notes of this episode. Now, Jennifer, could you share with us what's one thing that's going on in your life right now that you're really excited about, either something that you're working on to develop yourself or your people?
Yes. Well, we are embarking, I think, on a big shift in our business strategy at my company. We've been highly like white glove bespoke consulting has been our bailiwick. And then I give a lot of keynotes, which is great. And I love, and I could just plan to do a lot more of them. I think it's really my sweet spot, honestly. But I think we're moving into the online product arena, and we've launched our first online program in the last couple of months and have our first cohort of students. And our programs, I think our programs could be so many things. We're going to launch a new assessment behind the second book that's coming out in August around how inclusive of a leader are you, and actually give people a score and then kind of break down their score within 6 different domains. And so it's the first assessment we've ever really had like that as a company.
Very good.
So I think it has a lot of potential because people want to know
where
am I?
I agree.
And then they want resources and tools, whether it's a quickie online program that's really affordable or whether it's a much longer, 6-month multi-course program where they can really do a deep dive. We're starting to build all those things on the back end so that to get access to our knowledge, you don't need to hire us to come into your company. Basically, there's going to be a whole way to access what we do online. So I'm just really excited to investigate that. It's a great revenue generator for us, I think, a different kind of work stream, business unit, if you will. And it's also, who knows what's in store for us with the economy, but it's been a long time since we've had a correction. And, corrections and recessions are really difficult for consulting companies. I mean, a lot of us don't make it through. And I think we're recession proof now, but it's very important. And every entrepreneur that listens to you will know this, that you must diversify your revenue. You must, spread out the ways that you make money in as many ways as you can to protect yourself against downturns, particularly if you are a service company and you're attached to corporate budgets. And diversity has been viewed as a nice to have traditionally. And so, I think a lot of us, it would behoove all of us to think about like, how are you going to weather storms? Because we know storms are going to happen. And so that's another aspect that I'm really excited about having these online offerings. They're more affordable. They're something that people can do even within a recession environment to invest in themselves, continue to learn and grow. and prepare for the upswing. So not to be morbid, but it is something that has crossed my mind, and I'm sure has crossed everyone's minds that are listening to you if they run a business. So
of course,
I hope that's helpful.
Of course, definitely. All right, no, so they've heard all of the wonderful things that you're going to be embarking upon. They've gotten a little snippet of what your book is going to be about and all the things that will be supporting the launch of that book, as well as the generation and growth of the things that will come out of that book. How can they find you online to keep in touch with you, that probably get some of their organizational leaders to get that scoring that you're speaking of? Where can they find you, and where can they connect further so that they can keep in touch?
Certainly. So the book is actually available for pre-order on Amazon. So you can look up, it's called How to Be an Inclusive Leader. Mm-hmm. So you can get into the flow that way. Also, if you'd like to be a part of our newsletter, which I really recommend, we're going to be sharing everything we're doing, from new podcast episodes to announcements about the assessment and the book release, and all of my book release and launch parties and speaking engagements and things like that. If you'd send us an email at info@jenniferbrownconsulting.com. My podcast is called The Will to Change, and it's on iTunes and Stitcher, anywhere you listen to podcasts. Mm-hmm. And that we've got a wonderful Women's History Month roll-up episode that we just released this morning of 4 of my favorite episodes from, a year or two ago when I started the podcast, and we're pulling them back up and excerpting some of them. So mm-hmm. I'd really recommend folks check that out. And then I'm heavy duty in social. I'm always on Twitter at Jennifer Brown. I'm on Instagram at Jennifer Brown Speaks. We are on Facebook and LinkedIn, Jennifer Brown Consulting. And we look forward to hearing from you in any and all of those ways. So please join our community.
All right. Sounds awesome. So all of the links that Jennifer would have indicated that she's on the social platforms, we'll also have those available in the show notes of this episode. Now, before we wrap up, we always like to ask our guests, what is one quote or saying that during times of adversity or challenge, you revert to kind of help you to refocus? Do you have one of those?
I do. I like to think about the quote that was on President Obama's rug in the Oval Office. It says, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." And you talk about like an idea that keeps you working and getting up in the morning and thinking that what you're doing is making a difference. I mean, there's no better quote than that. I think Martin Luther King originated it, but mm-hmm. I think about it a lot because it is a struggle, because progress can feel slow. Sometimes it's a real galvanizing idea for me and many, many others who do the work that I do.
Yeah. So you definitely have to have one of those to keep you on track. Amazing.
That's right.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer, for taking time out of your very busy schedule. We really appreciate the nuggets that you shared with us today. I know we didn't get to delve extremely deep, but as I said before, you can check out her book. It's available on Amazon. It's amazing, and it will definitely give you a playbook of what you need to do in order to start the conversation for diversity and inclusion in your organization, or at least to help you know if you're on the right track, if you've started that journey already. We really enjoyed all of the great things that you shared with us today, and I really thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to share with us.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity.
All right. So if you'd like to connect with us even further, feel free to join our closed Facebook group. It's Navigating the Customer Experience Community. And feel free to follow us on Twitter at NavigatingCX. Again, happy International Women's Day. Wishing all of the wonderful boss ladies out there, continue crushing it, continue being inspirational, courageous, and brave. And I just wish you a wonderful rest of month and day. Thank you so much for listening. I'm your host, Yannick Grant.
Thanks for listening. For more awesome resources to take your customer service game to another level, head over to navigatingthecustomerexperience.com. See you next time.